What's up, everyone? Welcome to my corner of the internet. I'm your host, Ryan Cramer, and this is Crossover Commerce, presented by PingPong Payments, the leading global payments provider helping sellers keep more of their hard-earned money. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crossover Commerce. I'm your host, Ryan Cramer, and this is my corner of the internet where I bring the best and brightest in the Amazon and e-commerce space. But before we get started, just want to give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, PingPong Payments. What is PingPong Payments? Well, I'm glad you asked. That we are a cross-border payment solution helping sellers save more of their time, money, and effort when it comes to sending or receiving funds. So if you're paying your suppliers, your manufacturers, your VAs overseas, want to get money to them quicker so you can get your goods quicker, or just help your employees get paid on time without paying those exorbitant fees, make sure you check out a solution like PingPong Payments. You can do that by going to usa.pingpongx.com/podcast to catch all of our past episodes, but also sign up for free. It's free to save money today. And who doesn't want to save some money when it comes to sending or receiving their payments and also putting those funds back to their bottom line? So if you're a seller of any sort of large or small scale, you can save today and use those funds to invest more into your business and buy more inventory, or even help your way along to exiting your brand. So that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. So again, check out pingpongpayments.com in the links below, or go to usa.pingpongx.com/podcast. This is episode 202. Thank you for joining again. This is season 4. We've just started season 4 here last week, before we capped off our 200th episode in season 3, late into December. So we're starting fresh into 2022. It already feels like it's been a long week. So we're going to go ahead and get kick started with some great content this week. We got 3 episodes coming. So if you're watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, thanks for joining us for the first time or the 202nd time. We appreciate you just tuning in whenever you are able to. And if you happen to not be able to catch every episode, you can just go to our website, or you can go and find Crossover Commerce on your favorite podcast destination. That being said, I want to go ahead and kick off with one of the cooler companies that I haven't had on in a while, believe it or not. It's actually been one of the first 25 episodes that we had in season 1, back when they were known as a different name, Recon Brands. If you're thinking about who's Recon Brands, maybe you just forgot all about them. They've actually became Elevate Brands, one of the larger acquisition companies in the Amazon space today in terms of raising funds, acquiring different brands, and just growing like crazy. Based in Austin, Texas, as well as New York City, in New York, all over the world, they're growing like crazy. And we're going to be talking about what we saw in 2021, and also kind of looking forward to 2022 trends. So that's what today's episode is about. But actually can have him on the podcast for the first time. It's been a long time since I've been wanting to get him on the podcast, but really excited to have on the Director of Global Partnerships, TJ Hyland of Elevate Brands. TJ, let me go ahead and bring you on today. Thank you for joining us on Crossover Commerce Day.
Thanks, Ryan. How are you?
Man, I'm doing well. It's week 2 of 2022. A lot of twos going on today.
I was going to say episode 202 in 2022.
There's a rap, or there's a lot of rhyming. There's a lot of rap or rhyming in there. Exactly. I'm not awake enough. It feels like already 1 o'clock on East time when we're doing this. Not awake enough to come up with something creative like that. But anyways, thank you for spending some time today. Man, we actually intersected a lot for people who may not know, and they should. Your background, or what you did in your past and what you do now. Give me a quick minute or so background of you and your history in the space.
Sure. So when you were talking about PingPong cross-border payments, I was having a bit of flashback there. So
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. My background is I've been in the Amazon ecosystem since 2014. Worked at 2 previous companies in the global payment space, World First and Payoneer. So similar to PingPong in the sense of helping sellers who are selling cross-border with bringing your funds back, and then also making those payments out to suppliers and stuff like that. At Payoneer, I was the head of partnerships there, kind of connecting the ecosystem, right? And that's what's crucial here, and what Ryan's doing with PingPong is making the connection for sellers, where payments is not always something that you think about at the forefront, but it's a crucial part of the business, especially when in the e-commerce world, where every dollar counts and such cash flow heavy businesses. So in August of this year, about 5 and a bit months ago, I moved over to Elevate Brands. So here too, I'm looking after partnerships, and it's fun. It's different. It's exciting. We talk about the aggregator space and everything that's going on, and I think we're going to dive a little bit later. But same concept in the sense of connecting sellers with service providers with sellers, networks with people, and people with networks, and it's like just everything coming together. And it's been really fun at Elevate because they never really had somebody in this role before. And to me, it's a crucial role. It's a one to many role, but it's a how do you get in front of as many people in the right place in the right time with the right people and their platform. So again, thank you for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're obviously tugging on my heartstrings, is what I do, very similar to here at PingPong. A lot of people don't think about that, and I think it's kind of one of those missed ecosystems. Not if I'm an entrepreneur, for example, and I'm working on a scale, not even a service provider, and I'm talking about partnerships. It could be something in the likes of software. It could be the likes of shipping logistics. It could be the likes of lots of different ways in which your company needs to partner and either rely on an external extension of you on your company. And there's a lot of different businesses like ours where we provide services or run brands or whatever that might be. The kind of the glue that holds everything together between the sales, the marketing, the business development, whatever that may be, is the partnership world. So you've had that your experience in this space for a long time. Do you feel more it's like a networker and kind of a, hey, you should talk to this person, kind of making that those connections happen? Is that what you love so much about the role?
Yeah, I mean it's a people person role, right? You have to be able to know who you know and know who's good at what, right? When I was on the service provider side, it was very much of aligning myself and aligning our business with the businesses that we worked well with that had sort of a common guiding light to get to the end. And ultimately, that is supporting sellers in their mission to grow their business. And then, nowadays you talk about exiting your business, but back then you didn't even really have that option. But, it's kind of, a vetted voice, right? So the way that I think about partnerships are relationships. I have a relationship with this service provider who does shipping, right? You as a seller have been working with me for 3 years. You trust me. You trust my beliefs and who I've worked with. And, from that perspective, it's a vetted voice. You have the opportunity to go speak with 150 different shipping and logistics companies. Who has time to do that? So referrals are the ultimate sign of respect, I feel. So when somebody can say, I've worked with these people, they are good, they'll do good by you, that's the ultimate respect to receive one and then also to give one, right? It's like, I've recognized that you are good at your job and your company is great. And now, I want to pass business to you. The other side of it is, now I'm not on the service provider side anymore, but more on the quote seller side, right? Like we use a lot of these service providers. So it's kind of riding the line of, who do we use as a solution and who else can we explore working with, and which part of the businesses need some external help versus internal help. So it's a fun game of matching things up like that and experimenting, right? That's one of our big MOs is to experiment, and if you're going to fail fast and get on to the next thing, which is really focusing on the growth side.
That's a great way to look at it. Do you find it? And I know if I had to put myself in your shoes, from a service provider, obviously you can partner with lots of different people, and they can be in that same category, for example. But if you're an operator, very similar to what Elevate does, you may not get a chance to spread the love as much. Do you find it more difficult to have to actually dive in the weeds, maybe on not your level, but as a company of like, hey, there's lots of great options. Who do we pick? Because you can't have that. You can't spread the love with shipping logistics too terribly much, I'm assuming, or you can't use every single software solution. Just that doesn't make financial
Right.
sense. So it's who do you pick and what do you decide to go with? Does that make it a little bit more of a harder decision in which, hey, these are our trusted, we actually use these companies in that capacity, or is it a little bit more different than that?
It makes my job a little bit more difficult, right? Because I have the relationship with, if you say like PPC agencies, with the softwares and with the agencies, and there's 5 softwares and there's 5 agencies. We can't use all 10 of them, but all
Mhm.
10 of them want to, elevate to use their business, right? So it's about maintaining those relationships. And, I can speak to my experience. In the past, I've worked with people at this business, or in the past, I've worked with them, and I know that they would do a good job. But the thing is, it's spreading the love, right? And I think we talk about this in the aggregator circle enough. Like, I don't necessarily really consider a lot of the aggregators as competitors, right? I think we may compete on certain listings, certain categories, certain keywords, but in reality, there's plenty of pie to go around, right? We're going to compete on deals, and this brand's going to be talking to X company and Y company and us, and that might drive the price up and benefit the seller, but we're not really competitors in the long scheme of things. And ultimately, for most of the aggregators, like we want them to be successful, right? Like I think there's enough pie, big enough pie, I should say, for everyone to win here, and sellers included. Sellers are the biggest winner here.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and that's a good segue into what I think 2021 showed us is there's a couple different things I would point out. And if you've been living under a rock for a year, congratulations, you've escaped a lot in the space. But if you're new to e-commerce, or if you just came into the space, you probably heard a lot of the numbers of raises and capital raises, and all these companies coming out of essentially nowhere, but they're building brands and they're having all these opportunities to operate on a grander scale. I say grander scale because with more money comes capability, right? If I'm a person who is a team of three, I can only scale so much in terms of
Right.
logistics and growth and sales and whatnot. But in the use of an aggregator space, or a brand aggregator like you guys at Elevate, there's the opportunity of doing it on a grander scale, but then rewarding the person for starting that business or brand and kind of seeing it through to the end. So when you were potentially looking around at which aggregator you want to look at, why Elevate? Like, what makes Elevate special and different in your eyes as opposed to others that might be out there? What's that distinguishing factor?
Yeah, I think from a seller perspective, you want to always feel comfortable with who you're doing business with, and I think it comes back to the relationship side of things, right? You want to be with someone who's maybe been in your shoes, or you can know and you can trust. And I think that's one of the main differentiators about Elevate is Ryan and James, the two co-founders, who I think have been on Crossover Commerce, like you said, episode 25 or whatever that was. They started as sellers themselves, right? So they started selling in 2016, 17. They did retail arbitrage. We're selling a
They're
very
selling
well
Nike
known
shoes, weren't they, or something like
Nike and
that? Yeah.
Adidas shoes. Yeah. And, they grew it into a pretty significant business, but then ultimately it's a resale business. You don't really have any asset to sell. So in the end of 2019, they pivoted and got into the aggregator space, and Recon Brands, which it was, as you mentioned, became Elevate Brands, right? And that's where we sit today. Sort of why Elevate is a great question. And ultimately, from a seller perspective, there's a couple of things that you should consider. One is the structure that you want, right? Do you want 100% acquisition and you hang up your coat and you go sit on the beach with your money, fine, cool, no more worries for you? Or do you still want to be involved? We are probably one of the only aggregators that does partnerships and joint ventures. Speaking with a lot of the larger sellers nowadays, they're not ready to hang it up yet. They still think that their business and their brand has a ton of potential. And for us, it's exciting, right? If they come to us and say, we want to do a joint venture, we want to do a partnership, we want to take some cash off the table, but we still think that with Elevate, coupled with our expertise, we can now grow this business from a 5 million EBITDA business to a 15, to a 20, to a 50, right? They might cap out at their capabilities, but the brand they know still has a ton of potential. So we do partnerships like that. We do joint ventures. We do situations where we'll acquire the team and the owner can go, do whatever they want. They're out of the business. But, that's a big consideration for a lot of sellers is I have a team of 5, 10, 15 people. Like, what are they going to do? I don't want to put 15 people out of a job just because I wanted to get a payday. So we've had an example of a deal we closed a couple of months ago where the owner actually left, but 13 of their team members actually joined our business and are now full Elevate employees. So it's kind of like that aqua hire situation. And then the last part is just on flexibility. It's on deal structure. We're talking about that. There's the partnership acquisition, 100% acquisition. but also on the payout side, right? If you wanted cash, if you wanted the earnouts, if you wanted equity and Elevate, in certain situations, like when we talk a lot about those partnerships, it's, we offer equity in the Elevate parent company, right? Because you're no longer working really for yourself, you're working for the greater company. You want to focus on growing your business, but you also want to have a leg in to the greater business goals. And that's actually one of the great parts about Elevate is every employee has equity as well, right? So you're not just clocking in, clocking out, doing your job. While we've raised a significant amount of money, we're still, in theory, a hyper growing or hyper fast growing startup, right? There's still a ton of things changing and roles changing and jobs descriptions being added and added and added, and having equity like that from any level of employee perspective or from a business that exits, it's some kind of extra kicker for you.
Well, you had mentioned something that I've heard not very much of, to be honest, and that's in the capacity of evolving the structure of which people want to either leave their business or have a mark in the space, right? They don't, it's no longer just a clean cut. It feels like, it seems that there's this partnership. I like the partnership aspect of,
Right.
if they want to stay on, it's just thinking outside the box of how does everyone win in that capacity. So do you see yourself as more than just like there? I have this feeling that 2022 is going to bring a new phrase or a new like word for what businesses are. It's not aggregators anymore, because that's just the acquisition of like assets, right? It's a very clean and simple cut and dry definition. This is more of a collaborative partnership, or a
Mm-hmm.
more like an accelerator, not an accelerator because that's a different business model, but almost like a cultivation of brands and growth of brands from conception all the way to, maybe it is to
Yeah.
portfolio or private equity or what it is down the line, or if Elevate goes public. And again, we're not going to go down that road either, but it seems like that this concept of different partnerships, does that make it even more exciting, or should that make it more exciting for brands out there to understand and be educated that, hey, it's not just a cut and dry scenario of you're leaving your business behind that you put your blood, sweat, and tears. It's now a, hey, I found a growth partner in a business that understands my vision. We can work together to eventually, maybe I do leave it in a good hands of them, or I think that there's more potential and I want to see it through.
Yeah. When I was at Payoneer previously, I hosted a roundtable of what we now are openly calling aggregators. And I'll tell you, in the previous call before the webinar that we did, nobody wanted to be called an aggregator. They all came up with I'm an operator, I'm an accelerator, I'm a this, I'm a that, like a lot of the names you just said. And I think aggregators has kind of just stuck because it's maybe the easiest thing to just name them. But I'm 100% on the same boat as you. Is like, and I think that's kind of what really differentiates a lot of the quote aggregators is a lot of them do business differently. While we're all buying these Amazon businesses, post day one, everyone kind of has a little bit of a different strategy in terms of how they want to get this business to the next level. Whether it is like as a conglomerate or whether it is individual businesses and scaling 100 businesses or focusing on 10 big ones or however it is. I think what you said about a growth partner is spot on, right? Like we have the abilities to help these businesses scale, and that's growing a business from 1 to 5 million, hard, but easy in the grand scheme of things. Growing it another 5x from 5 million to 25 million, a lot harder on your own, especially with what we know of capital constraints and just resources, right? You can do 1 to 5 million maybe by yourself, a couple of VAs. You can't really get to 25 million EBITDA business with a small team. Like just in terms of the product that you need to turn over to get there is significant. So yeah, I think viewing what we now call aggregators generally as growth partners and more specifically Elevate in the way a lot of the structures that we're doing it is really accurate.
Absolutely. What about so in 2021, that's where a lot of people understood, like, I think the statistic is pretty notorious of there's $1 billion raised in every single, I say raised, it was announced by companies every month for the entire year. I think 12 to 13 was the official number that
Mhm.
2021 entered. In your estimation, as obviously you can't predict, but do you think that continues to grow, or do you think it levels off and slows down? Is this just a beginning ripple for you, or is there a bigger wave coming in that capacity? If you had to guess, because you're from the financial world, obviously starts with a trickling effect, and you see one, and then you see 10, and then you see 50. Is this did we hit our peak, and then we're coming back down to earth, or are we still riding that rocket ship, do you think?
It's a really interesting question, right? There's the biggest player in the space making the biggest waves, and everyone kind of benefits off that. But at a certain point, their valuation becomes a certain number, and are they still growing, right? Um, and is that value still increasing? And I think it is, right? I think probably for the first half of this year, we'll still see some significant raises. We've only raised up to Series B to date. And I know like we have grander growth plans, right? So whatever's next coming is coming. And I don't think we're alone. I saw on LinkedIn just before we popped on that another company raised $113 million, right? You know, I think in general, what we'll see by the end of the year is a bit of consolidation. I think it's just inevitable. There's way too many aggregators. And I think what we kind of need to do is see what is out there from an aggregator perspective, from a brand perspective, like what the amounts being paid now are significant, right? And now we're getting to sort of a next level of businesses that are out there where the payouts are going to be even higher, right? So to do that, you need to raise more money. But again, a lot of times when you're raising debt and equity, or more on the debt side, you need to prove the growth, right? And have the growth plan and have the potential. That's why I think from an Elevate perspective, we've probably been a bit conservative in 2021. We acquired 20 something, 25 to 26 brands in the calendar year. I think on the smaller side in January last year, the businesses were, valued under $1 million, and, closed the year paying out 20 million something, right? So, we've acquired larger businesses as we've grown. So we didn't try and get ahead of ourselves and take on too much. And I think that's really benefited us to date and will in the future, right? Growing at our pace, and not just doing the big cash grab and acquiring as many businesses as possible. Just doing the compliance and the due diligence and being really strategic about who we're buying, so that we know that we can grow that business, whether with the original entrepreneur or not, is just going to set us up for longevity. And I know you touched on what our growth plans, exit plans are, and it's not dissimilar to some of the other players in the space, right? Whether we do get acquired or whether we go public, like all these things are on the table.
Options are always nice to have, so it's
Yeah.
never a bad thing to like corner yourself into a market and have to find that one person. But is it fair to say, and I think I have my own personal opinion about this notion that aggregators have made it harder, or brand acquisition companies, we're going to come up with a title here on this podcast in this episode, whatever, is it fair to put blame on companies that are acquiring brands at scale, that costs are rising across the board on Amazon, whether it be operations and cost for PPC clicks, or just I see no similarity to logistics. I only see it on the cost of advertising in terms of PPC or standing out on Amazon. Is that a fair assessment that people can put on people who are acquiring larger brands? Because I have my own opinion, but I would like to hear from you of when people say that. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, my initial thought is no. If you think about the number of brands that have been acquired, since aggregators came about, whenever that is, say, 2.5, 3 years, like maybe it's 1,000 brands, maybe it's 500 or the high hundreds number of brands, at least from a U.S. perspective. How many sellers are there on Amazon? Over 1 million, right? So yes, the spend might be different from a larger brand or an aggregator in that sense, But like when you look at the entire picture and the entire scheme of things, it is not that impressionable, I don't think. I think it also will, yeah, aggregators, I think, and obviously I'm sitting here at one, so I have a little bit of bias, but I think they're very good for the industry as a whole, right? From a product perspective, from a SaaS software perspective, from a solution perspective, like the, all of the best softwares that are on the table today were created by sellers themselves, right? And I think that that's pretty evident that they saw a problem, a gap, a need in the space, and said, nobody's doing this. I can build it. I can use this tool for myself. And then what they do is they realize, hey, everyone can actually use this, and it's not really a leg up advantage. It's more like democratizing the opportunity. And I think that's really what aggregators are doing here too, is like across all the softwares and all the solutions to have something to build at scale. If you wanted to still do your business and scale it on your own, you know, you're going to benefit from the changes that a lot of these SaaS, logistics, whatever companies are, you know, making for the aggregators or creating for the aggregators, and benefiting from that in the long run. But interested to hear your take on it too.
No, I think I hate broad stroke commentary of, and the reason I say that is because on social media, it's very easy to assert an opinion, not back it up with any sort of factual evidence, and then and just kind of get people behind you. It's an easy assessment to kind of correlate, oh, things got a lot more expensive, or the shipping logistics problem happened when a lot more aggregators came in space. That's not true. That's simply not true. There's too many. There's clearly more evidence of it's just manpower shortage and everything like that. But
Right.
when it comes back to cost, it's not like you are spending $1 million budget on a coffee mug PPC spend. That's just not the case. I think the case is that time over time in Amazon, costs have got increasingly rised, and Amazon continues to raise their costs across the board. And I think, gosh, even brands I think associated with it was a recent report back of 2021 of there was something around 30 to 34% of costs are all going directly to Amazon, and that's just like referral fees, that's storage fees, that's everything like that. Amazon didn't call PPC necessary spend. It is a add-on option of doing that, but we all know as brand owners, you kind of need PPC to stand out in the capacity of if you're launching a product or you want to keep it at top of mind and take over certain categories. So I think that's an unfair assessment to say just because of more people entering the space and having money at their capability, it's all going to go directly to PPC. I think it just has to be how do you get smarter about your spend and how to utilize your dollars and stretch it a little bit differently. But again, that's just my take. I wish I had more factual evidence to back that up, but I can't imagine that just because there's billion-dollar entities that enter the market again as a collective whole, people can do that at scale as well. And if they're collectively doing that, they're going to be doing the same spend as well to grow their brands. You're just doing it on a faster pace. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
initial thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, right? Like in terms of there's in the last calendar year, how many significant changes on the Amazon platform have there been for sellers, right? And we talk about search, find, buy, and review manipulation, all that. Like people that maybe had done that stuff in the past to launch products are now realizing, hey, I need to do actual PPC to launch products, and realizing the cost of that compared to the cost of the previous option. Similarly, you touched on like logistics and freight, right? I think that's coming from China. I think that's coming from, you know, California and the shortages there in staff, right? And like, and your container costs now being 20K versus 2.5K or 3K, like, yeah, that's obviously going to affect your margins and that's going to affect your business. But that neither of those things are the direct results of an aggregator.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
just put that to bed. I don't think that's a fair assessment for people to say it. I'm
We're on
gonna
the same
back up.
side of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, again, costs are in the value of the if there's a blame to be, again, it's just because there's more again, it's more shopping, there's more eyeballs in the nature, it's going to drive up costs, and inherently it's hard to educate economics in terms of supply and demand, and when there's
Yeah.
when there's no more demand, that's when, and your supply is at shortage, just when costs go up, and that's inherently what is happening right in front of us. We actually had a question come in, TJ.
Ooh.
This is good for you, from Chris Schultz on LinkedIn. Chris asked, "What categories are you focusing on there at Elevate?" And that's a great question, Chris. Is Elevate known as an agnostic aggregator, or are they known as more of a specific category acquirer, or you will only look at certain categories, as many as some are out there are?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we are category agnostic. We stay away from, ones that may be very opinion based, like fashion, high SKU count as well. But generally, I think we currently sit in 10 plus categories across our 30 something brands. So we're pretty agnostic in that sense. What I would say about the category is the niche, the better. The more obscure the niche is better, right? The place that you can stand out the most, it adds the most value to your business. Uh, Categories that we do sit in and that we do uh, like, outdoors, pets, um, sometimes in the baby space. So, not that we're only looking at those, but those are ones that we've acquired that we like, that we've done well in. And when new brands come to market, it says this one's in the pet space, and you look around and you say, well, does this one complement the one we already have? Yes, that makes it sort of extra incentive for us to go after something like that.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I think those are very very popular categories too. So there's lots of
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of different purchases being happening in those, and those are very very not green but very rich spaces to be in too. Has there been a brand that, so I guess, like, I also asked the opportunity of, is there a minimum that, if I'm an aggregator, or if I'm a brand, is there a minimum, or is there a set of requirements that I should be inherently like fixed on? Like, is there a certain dollar amount that I need to be like discretionary earnings at the end of the year? What do I need to have in place and ready if I'm going to be acquired by Elevate Brands?
Yeah. So from our perspective, like I said earlier, we kind of, you know, a year ago we were buying smaller businesses, but as we've scaled, we have the ability to buy the larger businesses. I would say from a minimum perspective, we're looking at businesses doing a seller's discretionary earnings of around $1 million a year, but there's no real cap on that, right? So if a business is doing 5, 10, 15, we're obviously interested in those as well. And not to be said, if you're doing under $1 million, if you're doing 600K or 800K or whatever it is, but on a really great growth path where there's solid product and not too complicated and all that, like let that's interesting to us as well. So we're not really saying no to everyone, and we have a team here that sort of evaluates the brands when they come in and can give you feedback as well, right? So if you say, you know, what do you think my business is worth? Do you like my business? Do you have any feedback? We'll be able to look at that from a high level, depending on whatever information you want to share, and give you feedback and say, today on the market, you should be able to get this, even if it's not by us. We're pretty open and transparent in those conversations too.
Do you feel like that there is a more of an emphasis on those minimum qualities instead of a potential of a product that just hasn't gotten there yet? Like, what I mean by is, it needs a little bit of coaching, it needs a little bit of love, or it needs some financial backing in order to get it where it could be taking almost more risk. I would say risky from the investment standpoint, but the product is so good, it just hasn't gotten there from said founder yet. Is that where a market, do you think that's going to be a little bit more inherently risky of, hey, we can't go after the top person in the baby toy category anymore because they get hit up by everyone or they sold, and that will continuously be there more often than not? Maybe it's shooting for the middle and finding those high value brands that have really great ideas. They just don't know how to take it to the next level, and going to a person like elevating that brand to another level, and everyone wins in that capacity. Is that where you think the market continues to look forward in 2022?
Yeah, 100%. The more brandable the business is, um, the more opportunity there is, the more attractive it is for us to look towards. And you're right, if you say toys, right? Like I'm sure the top five guys or 10 people in toys are hit up every day by 100 different aggregators, right? So do you then look a little bit down the page, maybe page two, right? Because no one goes to page two. And you say, okay, based on these keywords and these categories, how does this product rank with A, what we already have, B, what we're targeting, B, what might be of interest to us in the future? And could we take this business that may be doing just a million or just 800K, which is still a significant business, and say, can we pump cash into this, put investment into it from a resources perspective, and turn it into one of those top guys on the page? Yes, the short answer is yes, right? Like you, in reality, if you're going to be paying 7, 8x multiple for these businesses, which a lot of the larger ones are asking for, from an investment perspective, to make that back, it is going to take a long time and be pretty difficult, right? And if you're already in the high performing business, already the category leader, how much can you actually grow that business? And when we look at businesses, we look for those opportunities, whether it's under optimized and we can figure that out, or they have a great product but need better branding, or we need to expand it to new markets, whether that's Walmart or D2C or international or whatever it is. All those are opportunities and levers for us to do it. The odds are that category leader, that number one pole position person, has already pulled a lot of those levers, right? Because they've already gotten to that position. Whereas
high floor, low ceiling companies
down the page a bit, there's a ton of opportunity for us, right? And whether that's just the original brand owner or seller doesn't want to do it, or just doesn't have the means or the capacity to do it, those are all things that are good for us and indications for us of an opportunity that we're interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. High floor, like I was saying earlier, yeah, high floor, low ceiling brands. And that's what we've kind of learned across, and if my audience has learned as well, is there's a lot of people who are understanding that, that number one option, there's nowhere to go but down. And that's scary for a lot of investors, right? There's more opportunity for maybe a falling off than there is for growth opportunities. So what's that healthy balance of, hey, if I'm there and you're consistent? And I think then the brand I always think about is the number one pillow brand, right? Of, hey, it's been there, has 300,000 reviews or something crazy like that, which again is another, how many reviews is too many reviews? That's a different episode for a different
conversation
time. But
totally.
yeah, how many is too many?
How do you get all those reviews?
Amazon.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, yeah. And at what juncture do I feel confident that has a good user base and customer base? But anyways, when you're the best pillow in Amazon and you're there for 5 straight years, notoriously, obviously, besides selling more units, there's not a lot of places for growth besides off channel, like you mentioned. So with that being said, I know off channel is a lot of focus for a lot of different companies going into 2022. Is it scary to think that moving a brand off of Amazon, or to put more money and effort into like a D2C or a marketplace that's not as structured or more as mature as like a Walmart? Is that inherently risky or kind of frustrating to kind of like navigate through the waters and understand like what the buyer dynamic is, and not really get the persona like an Amazon where you have data and you have access to all that kind of buyer capacity? Is it a little bit more challenging to navigate those waters?
It's absolutely more challenging, but the future is omni-channel, right? You cannot only be selling on one marketplace in one region. It's just not sufficient, and I would argue that alone is probably riskier, right? We know how some of the marketplaces act in terms of suspensions and shutdowns and competitors and everything. That's competitive, and I'm sorry, that's risky in its own way, to have all your eggs kind of in one basket. From our perspective, I touched on, but growth is super important, right? So we have a team that focuses on off Amazon marketplaces, exploring those and which ones are good for which brands, because frankly, not everyone is good for each brand, and vice versa. And then also D2C, which brands are good for D2C, which ones already have a presence on D2C, which ones should we launch a presence on D2C? Does it come with a list? Do we have the traffic? Does it have an Instagram following? Like all these things to cultivate the community and the personas like you're talking about. While it might not be as obvious and clear cut on Amazon, off Amazon as it is on Amazon, I would say two things. One, I think Walmart's a bit of the wild, wild west like Amazon was maybe 5, 6 years ago. They want more sellers, they want more buyers. So they're willing to play with sellers. And then D2C is like you have much more control. You own the seller, right? And you own the experience. And you own more of your money, right? Typically in terms of, not paying all those fees. But again, it's like you don't want to cut off the hand that feeds you, right? Like Amazon is the guy or person in this position that has allowed you to get to this place. You're not going to be able to generate traffic like Amazon can provide to you, 95% of the time. So while I say, it may be risky to have all your eggs in one basket, I think it's probably less risky to diversify, to have, an international presence. And I think I'm biased on that. But then to also have the D2C, the Walmarts, the eBay, even retail, right? Like certain products that we acquire, they're consumer goods. Whether it's the exact version of it that sits on a shelf in Target or on Target.com or in Walmart, a lot of the products that we acquire are shelf worthy as well. So, those are part of the longer term growth strategies. But, in 2022, we're making significant headway into all of them.
Which is super exciting for the space. I think, as businesses continue to grow, I think that's just the natural evolution of it, which is really cool and exciting. Chris actually had a couple of questions. I know they're a little bit more specific, so I'll just go ahead and plug you, Chris. Yeah, I would go ahead and just connect with TJ too, and we'll make sure that you guys email and how to connect with him off this. But just for if this makes sense for you, TJ, if it's not too in depth, are you buying companies with massive, and this is from LinkedIn. So if you're having a question or have a question for TJ or myself, feel free to submit in the comment section. Chris asks, are you buying companies that have massive unit turnover because of increased shipping costs from China as to fill full containers as well? And then he mentioned another comment, what logistic network do you have off of Amazon USA? So again, two different questions, both in the logistics world. Maybe let's touch on that, TJ, of trying to figure out, just like everyone else, aggregators and companies like yours, not so very different than a 1 or 2 person unit shop. Of you still have to figure out how to get your goods into ports, into warehousing, FBA facilities, FBM warehousing, things like that. How does that change what happened in 2021 and already happening in 2022? Does that change the strategy of your businesses of, hey, maybe we do acquire companies that come with warehouses, or have more reliance on third-party warehousing so we can get units in via FBA and not have to rely on FBA as much, and so on and so forth? Or maybe just sourcing and logistics is now in South America or Mexico or something a little bit more close, but not as initially cost effective. Has that changed more of the dynamic of the shipping and logistics strategy?
So what I would say is yes to all the above, right? I think you hit on a lot
I'm
of
just
things
gonna
that
put this on a silver plate for you.
I was just gonna say, right? So from the first question, are you buying companies that have massive unit turnover? I think unit turnover does not necessarily matter to us. What we focus on more are the margins, right? So, how is this business performing and how are the margins over time? Obviously freight costs increased and you want to fill your container, so you get, the most effectiveness out of the space, and the dollar amount. But it really depends on the per business basis. So happy to connect offline on that, right? If you fill a container with a big product or you don't have enough space because your product, or you have too much space because your product is small, it really depends on what the margin is that and how that affects your overall business. In terms of the logistics network, just to touch on that, the sourcing front. So yeah, we have a whole sourcing team that's already made headway elsewhere in the world, in India, in Vietnam, and somewhat in Latin and South America, just, keeping every option open. And I think the place that people forget most about is the United States, right?
Right. I was going to
there's
ask about that.
there is, definitely opportunity here. There's certain products, there's certain businesses that people want to buy made in the U.S., right? They don't want to buy a version made internationally. Yes, with that, you typically have to charge higher, but most people believe that as a consumer, I'll pay more because it's made in the U.S. It'll get to me sooner. It'll be higher quality, whatever the excuses may be. So, yeah. So, again, that comes back to margin, right? Like if it costs you $2 more to make per unit, but you can get your orders done like that, and you're not paying the container fee to come from China to California, and then you're also be able to get inventory a lot quicker, so you're not waiting to refill FBA or your 3PL. Is that worth it to you? Like the opportunity cost, you're going to be selling more because you have it on your shelf and you're not stocked out. You're paying $2 more per unit, but is that offset by the container cost? So again, every business is different, every situation is different, but it's all things that every business today should explore what their options are. Obviously, there's certain things that it just doesn't make sense to be made in the U.S. versus China, but also, Mexico and Central America have incredible capabilities on the production side, and should be competing with China in the coming years. Maybe not at the scale that China is, but if you can find a niche supplier that works with you, they don't need to put it on a shipping container or get it across the sea. They can drive it up the border as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, finish.
I was going to say, I think one of the cooler things is just knowing the options available. I think
Right.
just being able to come to the table and say, this is where my costs are. And again, that's part of the partnership network world of that you and I live in is, hey, maybe there is a company that can help you facilitate that same product or consumption, or just produce those products at a cheap, or maybe a little bit more expensive cost, but then again, you don't have to worry about the time zone differentiating, the language differentiating, the time aspect of everything. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it, and which is going to be more useful for you not having the cost up front, and you have that ability to cover that, but you just don't have the choice to basically let your product stock out. That's almost more like torpedoing your yacht, if you will, and letting it sink.
Exactly.
That's worst case scenario for any business if they're going to exit or just be profitable in that notion. Out of stock, worst case scenario. Do not let that happen. However, you
Well,
have to,
right.
and work
Stocking
backwards.
out is like the worst thing that can happen to you, aside from a listing being taken down. But stocking out because you've just spent how much money on PPC to get the rank, to get the positioning, to get up the page, maybe to get the buy box, and it's like you stock out, you're down the bottom, right? And you're going to fall pretty fast. So exploring all your options, like I said, LATAM and Mexico definitely have the capabilities, and I think Tim Jordan and Amy Weiss are doing a
They're
trip
going
to
there. I think
Mexico.
they're going down. Yeah, that's what Amy
Yeah,
said
so
last episode.
a
She's
big
gonna
sourcing
be
trip. Yeah, so another
big
plug
sourcing trick.
for their trip. Like that's really interesting stuff, right? That's people have done trips to China, and now it's like, okay, cool. What else is there? And I'm excited to see what comes from that.
Absolutely. As we're wrapping up kind of this episode, TJ, you delve in a lot of international and just kind of looking at a bigger picture of e-commerce at scale. What's exciting for you in 2022, and then maybe obviously what Elevate, and then kind of tie that into like what Elevate's going to be doing and focused on here in the early days and months of 2022.
Yeah, I mean, for me, from my perspective, like I still get really excited that we have the ability to change sellers' lives, right? I think back to 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18 even, and like these sellers really just thought they were going to have to, not have to, but could just run these businesses in perpetuity and make, a good chunk of change on a monthly basis and have it as their side gig or even their full-time job. But now they have the opportunity to make sort of life-changing money and generational money, right? If you're paying out $20 million, that's probably $19 million than you ever thought you'd end up with, right? So that part still makes me or gets me really excited. And, that's personally, but then also from an Elevate perspective, like, empowering sellers to take control over their lives. Like, they definitely started this journey on Amazon to do just that. You hear so many stories of, I was stuck in my 9 to 5, hated it, started this on the side. Now it's this, now it's that. And the thing is, like, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, it doesn't go anywhere. You sell your business, and guess what? You can do it again, or you can go do something else. Like, we have so many people that tell us, like, when they do sell their business, like, we're gonna start again. We're gonna build a new business, and bought 2 businesses from the same guy already, and he's building another business, right? And now it's kind of that term, which is build to sell, which is a whole new genre of businesses, but it's a bit more optimized, more focused business that's built exactly for how the aggregator wants it. Rather than building it for 5 years, you build it for a year and a half, 2 years.
That
And
makes
then
sense.
just, yeah, and then just, from an aggregator perspective, like I said, we're looking to raise more money. We're looking to make bigger differences, and not only take this business from where it is today, from 30 something brands, and say we want 100 brands, but more so focusing on the growth of those brands, right? We have a sort of 2030 vision, which I guess would be 7 years post today, or 8 years. And like, we want to elevate brands product in every household in America, right? Which I think is very achievable. And it's something about doing things the right way, with the right people, with the right entrepreneurs. Like, the one thing that I say often is, nobody knows these businesses better than these sellers themselves, or the brand owners themselves. A lot of times it's an idea they thought of, and a lot of times it's an idea that they found, that they fell in love with, that they made their passion and made their product, or made their business. It's always that argument of, do I have a business or do I have a product? And the ones with the businesses have sort of evolved, taken that single product and built it into something more. And that's what we're really looking to do, is to take this conglomerate of businesses and build it into something bigger.
Does Elevate ever think about, or do you know if that, and again, you can tell me to go fly a kite if you don't want to answer this. Do you guys ever consider building out your own in-house brands, or is that welcome in the culture there? Is it, if someone has an idea and obviously you want to operate and do that, if it's not competing with another brand that you guys are operating, is that welcome within the company, or is that expected to happen?
Well, I think a little bit on the brand manager side. Some of the ones, we have people that have sold businesses to us, like I said, that work for us. We've also have people that sold businesses to other aggregators that now work for us. So, from there, they're like experts in this. They know what they're doing. So they're operating our brands, but they're also potentially launching their own brands. And, it's something that comes up to us often. There's a question of, why are you paying $10 million for a brand? Why don't you just acquire a brand? And it's like, oh, so why don't you just start a brand? And it's like, well, even if I put $10 million in it, is that the best use of the $10 million, right? The first sort of 6 months, getting things going, the product sourcing, the logistics, getting into America, and then the initial ranking, like, that's the hard part. The scaling from there is typically easy. The creating variations, once you already have the engine going, is not as hard as the initial part. If the initial part was easy and you could just throw cash at it, like, everyone in the world would be doing it.
Yeah, you'd be
It
an
takes it
incubator.
takes a
You wouldn't
different
be a
mindset.
you wouldn't be
Yeah,
an aggregator. You'd be an incubator.
exactly.
But yeah, I would agree with you. I think the time equity that you're paying for, that's what ultimately what it comes to, is you have to sift through the data. You can't go down every dark rabbit hole
Exactly.
yourselves. That's just impossible and not a good use of time. But when people do that for you, they're working on their own behalf. Again, they're probably reinvesting into their business. They're doing all those things for you. You're just paying for that time equity over the past 12 months to, I'm going to say, probably 6 years is probably the upper end of what you're dealing with. I don't know many people past that 6 year mark, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I think it's super fascinating in that world, and continue to hear stories of really cool entrepreneur journeys of how they got to
Of
where they
course.
are and exiting. But Elevate, in the last 2 minutes, what do you guys, what's next on the docket? You guys are sponsoring lots of stuff. What's coming up on the slate where people can reach out and engage with you guys?
Yeah, so we will be on the online seller cruise. with Carlos Alvarez at the beginning of February. We'll be at Toma Rabinovich's event in the end of February, which is in Bulgaria. So I'll be in Bulgaria for the first time ever. But then, of course, we'll be at Prosper. So we'll have a large presence there, and we're making some cool announcements in the next, hopefully, 2 weeks. So I'm going to tease that here, and I'm not going to say what it is, although I'm so excited about it. So in about hopefully 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be making an announcement, and then a bunch of other cool stuff leading up to Prosper and beyond. Right.
So we're going to see an Elevate event here this year that you're going to have to plan and build out yourself.
That's why I love partners. Right. I love partners.
Other people
partners can arrange, and I'll join, and we'll bring our sellers and some money.
God bless the people who run events. That's all I have to say. I'd rather attend and sponsor than have to conceptualize from the beginning. But no, that's really exciting. I know you guys are your logo's tied to a lot of things. So the marketing team, props to you if you're listening to this over at Elevate. And I've watched, like I said, from the beginning of the show, I've watched Recon brands become Elevate brands and see all the cool things have come from this. But it's kind of watching Recon become Elevate and then watch everything kind of follow along. So you guys, one of the leaders in the space, I think, very highly thought of in that regards too. And
thank you.
I can't wait to see and work with you guys continuing in the future and seeing really cool stuff and helping entrepreneurs get to their eventual exit. So that's really cool. TJ, how can people get in touch with you if there's a way that they have questions or if they want to engage or talk about cool business ideas that they have? How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. On LinkedIn, if you're watching it there. I would say Facebook, but I can't access my Facebook because I set 2-factor authorization, can't log in. So email is probably the best, which is just tj@elevatebrands.com.
Gotcha. Perfect. And we'll make sure that's tied. And obviously all of his profile for LinkedIn is tied in the show notes here as well. TJ, thank you so much for hopping on today. I'm super excited to see what Elevate does in 2022. And congrats on all the recent announcements of more hirings, more acquisitions, things like that. So congrats and keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, TJ. And again, thank you everyone who is listening and watching us live on Crossover Commerce. If you're listening to us, thank you for tuning in just a little bit from my corner of the internet to where you might be listening to us again on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you might be listening to, Amazon Music. This is where our podcast lives. We've had 202 episodes now of great content. You can go all the way back if you just go to usa.pingpongx.com/podcast to list of past guests, as well as the evolution of different topics, anything from sourcing, logistics to marketing and advertising. My goal is to help you understand the topic and get your questions answered. That's what every episode's about. So that being said, thank you so much, TJ and Elevate Brands. You can go and check them out again in their social links below. If you have questions, go ahead and reach out to them directly through that. Again, connecting people is what we do best and what I do best on this podcast. But if you have other questions, make sure you or want to learn more about the podcast, go and just follow us on social media to make sure you're notified of future episodes. That being said, we do have a couple of ones that I want to go ahead and quickly announce. Tomorrow, we will be going live with Karina from Ecom Nurse. We're going to be talking about the importance of building a brand on Amazon. And then on Friday, we have the one and only Tyler Jeffco back on the show, friend of the show, getting ready to properly file your taxes. Something that didn't think I would ever talk about on this podcast, but you know what? You as an entrepreneur have been asking for it. We're going to be helping you understand how to prep your business for filing taxes. Super important, especially when exiting your business like we talked about today. Make sure numbers are clean, they're aligning properly as well. But that being said, this is Crossover Commerce episode 202. Thanks for joining my corner of the internet. We'll catch you guys next time. Take care.